You're listening to the Small Business Accelerator podcast, accelerating success, one founder at a time.
With your hosts, Roger Bryant and Sarah Wilson.
We support small business owners, the little guys. We're here to help you win in today's landscape.
Join us each week as we reveal powerful strategies for small business owners that save you time and money.
Because we believe every small business owner should have access to Fortune 500 style strategies without breaking the bank.
Subscribe now on Spotify and Apple Podcasts to accelerate your small business success. Hey everyone, and welcome back. Today we're diving into something I think a lot of us struggle with. That constant firefighting mode and how we can step into, well, being a more strategic leader.
It's really something that resonates with a lot of people.
Yeah, it really does. We've got a couple of sources that we're using to kind of guide us today. Excerpts from constant firefighting to strategic leadership, and also this little snippet about an online course. It's called Automations Made Easy. And hopefully by the end of this deep dive, you'll know a little bit more about how to kind of make that shift, from just like always solving problems to really being more proactive and, having that long-term success, whether it's at work or even in your personal life.
Yeah, and it's really cool how this topic, you see it everywhere.
It really is. So let's start with something that maybe feels a little too familiar. Okay, so picture this. Yeah. You're just drowning in emails. The deadlines, they're like right around the corner. And you can't seem to catch a break. Have you ever felt that way? Like you're constantly putting out fires.
That's it. That's that firefighting mode that they talk about in the source material. And it's not just a personal thing either. I mean, organizations deal with this all the time. They're constantly, battling these immediate problems, just reacting to every crisis instead of taking a minute to step back and actually plan.
And it's like a vicious cycle, isn't it?
Absolutely.
The source talks about this firefighting trap. And it comes down to, they have 5 key characteristics. But 2 that really jumped out at me were immediate problem solving, and then also this lack of proactive planning.
Yeah, and those 2 things are they go hand in hand, don't they? I mean, when you're just reacting all the time, putting out one fire after another, you never really get the chance to, think strategically, to think about how to prevent those fires in the first place.
It's like that old saying, when you're up to your neck in alligators, it's hard to remember you were trying to drain the swamp. Yeah. But okay, let's be honest for a second. Sometimes putting out those fires, it can feel, I don't know, maybe a little exhilarating. You know what I mean? Like you get that rush of adrenaline when you solve a problem, you save the day. There's almost a sense of satisfaction that comes with it.
Oh, yeah, definitely. And the source even talks about, how firefighting can be kind of addictive. But it's important to remember that it's not a long-term solution. I mean, it's like relying on caffeine to get you through the day. Eventually, you're going to crash. And just like in your own life, organizations suffer when they're in this constant firefighting mode. They end up with burnout, higher costs, missed opportunities, all because they're so focused on what's right in front of them, that they kind of lose sight of the big picture.
It reminds me of this snippet we have about the online course called Automations Made Easy. Mm-hmm. Their slogan is, work on your business, not just in it. Mm. And that really speaks to this idea of, escaping the firefighting trap.
Yeah, it's a really powerful way to put it. And that's really what we're talking about today. Moving from that reactive firefighting mindset to something that's more proactive and strategic. And the best part is, it's not just for CEOs or, executives. This is something that anyone can benefit from, no matter what your role is or, what level you're at.
So let's talk about that shift then. What does it actually mean to be a strategic leader? Because I think a lot of people might assume that's just for the folks in those fancy corner offices.
Right. It's a common misconception. But what's really interesting is that, strategic leadership, it's not about your title. It's about your mindset. And in the source, they break down some key characteristics. And they're all incredibly relevant, whether you're, running a team or managing a project or even just trying to get a handle on your personal goals. Things like having a vision, being proactive, and communicating effectively.
Okay, so those sound great on paper, but how do they actually work in real life? I mean, let's say you're working on a big project at work or even something like planning your finances for the next year. How would those characteristics actually come into play?
Okay, so let's take visionary direction setting, for example. Imagine you're, leading a team. You're launching a new product. It's not enough to just be like, hey, let's make a great product. A strategic leader is going to take the time to define a clear vision. Why are we doing this? And communicate that vision to the team in a way that gets them excited.
So instead of just reacting to whatever problems pop up, They're thinking about the big picture. They're thinking about the long-term goals and making sure that everybody's like on the same page.
Exactly. And that ties into being proactive, right? So instead of just waiting for things to happen, they're thinking ahead. What are some potential roadblocks? What are some opportunities? And they're making deliberate choices to navigate those challenges and, really take advantage of those opportunities.
So it sounds like becoming more strategic is really about getting out of that reactive mindset and like being more intentional with how you spend your time and your energy. But to be honest, I think the idea of making that shift can feel a little daunting. Where do you even begin?
Yeah, and the source acknowledges that, this is a journey. It's not some quick fix. It takes time to shift your habits and embrace like a new way of thinking.
And speaking of embracing change,
Hmm.
the source also talks about the importance of something called transformational leadership, which sounds pretty intense.
It does, but it's
Yeah.
actually a very, I guess you could say, human-centered approach to leadership. Think of it this way. A transformational leader, they don't just give orders. They inspire and they motivate their team or even themselves, right? By creating that shared vision and empowering people to take ownership. They want growth, innovation, not just people doing what they're told.
And this is where I see the connection back to that Automation's Made Easy course, because they talk about automation as a tool for transformation. By freeing up your time and energy from all those like repetitive tasks,
Yeah.
you can actually focus on the stuff that really matters.
Absolutely. You're exactly right. Having the right tools and resources is a big part of this whole journey towards becoming a more strategic leader.
So, okay, aside from checking out automation, what are some things that like our listeners can actually do, some practical takeaways to be more strategic in their daily lives?
Well, the source gives a few strategies. First of all, and this is a big one, you need to make time for planning, even if it's just like 30 minutes a week. Block it out in your calendar. Think about your goals, your priorities, potential challenges. It makes a huge difference.
It's like scheduling a meeting with yourself, right?
Yeah.
Put it on the calendar, don't skip it. Time to think strategically.
Exactly. And another thing that helps is breaking down those big, overwhelming goals into smaller steps. It's a lot easier to like tackle a series of smaller tasks than to just stare at this massive goal and feel intimidated.
Yeah, it's like that saying, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time.
Yeah.
So we've talked about the why and the how of strategic leadership, but the source also has some really interesting case studies, real-world examples that show these concepts in action. What really stood out to you?
Oh, the Marina Bay Sands in Singapore. I mean, it's incredible. They've managed to create this iconic destination while also thinking about, things like sustainability and the well-being of their employees. It really aligns with everything we've been talking about. But there's another really interesting thing about these case studies.
What's that?
A lot of them highlight women in leadership roles. It's so inspiring to see more and more women stepping into these strategic positions and making a real impact.
That's fantastic. Okay, so we've covered a lot. We've talked about the downsides of always being in firefighting mode, what it means to be a strategic leader, and even some practical tips for actually making that shift. But it's important to remember, this isn't about achieving some like perfect state of strategic bliss overnight, right?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
It's a journey.
It is. It's about always trying to be more, proactive, thoughtful, and intentional in everything you do. And that actually brings us to a really important question for everyone listening. What's one small thing, just one thing that you could do this week to, break free from that firefighting cycle and start thinking more strategically?
I love that challenge. It doesn't have to be some big, like, life-altering change. Maybe it's just blocking out those 30 minutes in your calendar,
Yeah.
Like we talked about, to think strategically. Or maybe it's finding just one task you can automate to free up a little bit of mental space.
Right. Even taking a few minutes to really think about your goals and what's important, that can be a really powerful first step. The key is to just get started, build a little momentum.
Small steps, big changes. I like it. So speaking of real-world examples, let's go back to that Marina Bay Sands case study for a sec. You're saying they've created this like incredible destination while also making sustainability and employee well-being a priority. What did they actually do that shows, strategic leadership in action?
What's so cool about Marina Bay Sands is that they've really made sustainability part of everything they do. Like, they have this really innovative water conservation system. It collects rainwater and even treats and recycles wastewater, which is not only good for the environment, but it saves them money in the long run.
Oh, wow. So it's a win-win.
It is.
So they're not just thinking about the bottom line, right? They're thinking about the long-term impact on the environment and the community.
Yeah, absolutely. And they've also made employee well-being a huge priority. They have these amazing training programs, flexible work arrangements, and even, get this, on-site childcare. And it's not just about being nice, it's a smart investment in their people.
Makes sense. Because happy, healthy employees, they're more engaged, more productive, they're more likely to stay with the company.
Exactly. And it just creates this positive energy throughout the whole organization. It's a perfect example of how strategic leadership isn't just about, cold, hard decisions. It's about taking care of your people and creating a place where they can thrive.
So we've got this great case study. We've got practical tips for being more strategic. But I think we're still missing one piece of the puzzle here. What about that Automation's Made Easy course? Can you tell us a little bit more about how automation can actually help us become, better strategic leaders?
This is where it gets really interesting. The course really emphasizes that automation isn't just about making things faster. It's about getting your time and energy back so you can focus on those bigger picture, more strategic things.
So instead of spending hours, typing in data or answering the same emails over and over again, you can automate those tasks and actually have time to think and plan and come up with new ideas.
Exactly. Imagine if you could get rid of all those little, repetitive tasks and use that time to brainstorm, to learn new skills, or even just to take a break and recharge.
Sounds pretty amazing, actually. But I have to admit, I'm still a little bit confused. Can you give us a real example of an automation that somebody could use, either at work or in their personal life?
Sure. Let's say you're somebody who gets a ton of emails every day. Instead of spending hours going through them all, you could set up a simple filter. It would automatically sort messages by who sent them, the subject, or even keywords. So important emails go to a special folder, newsletters go to another folder, and all those sales emails you never open, straight to the trash.
Wow, that's actually really smart. So suddenly, instead of feeling overwhelmed by your inbox, you're actually in control. You can focus on the messages that really matter and let the automation handle the rest. I can already feel myself getting less stressed.
I know, right? And that's just one tiny example. There are so many possibilities when it comes to automation. And the Automations Made Easy course, it really walks you through everything. It helps you figure out which automations would be most helpful for you and how to actually set them up.
So just to sum things up, we've talked about the problems with constant firefighting, what it means to be a strategic leader, and some ways to actually make that change, including the power of automation, of course. We even looked at a real-world example, that Marina Bay Sands case study. But as we're wrapping up this deep dive, I want to leave our listeners with one final thought.
I think it's so easy, to just get caught up in the day-to-day and kind of lose sight of the bigger picture.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
But as we've seen, strategic leadership, it's about making that choice to, step back and think ahead and actually come up with a plan for the future.
It's about taking control, right? Taking control of your time, your energy, where you're headed, instead of letting, circumstances just kind of push you around.
And it's not like a one-time thing. It's an ongoing thing. Always trying to improve.
Right, is it?
Always pushing yourself to be more intentional and thoughtful and strategic in everything you do.
And you don't have to do it all alone either. There are so many resources out there, tools, even whole courses like that Automations Made Easy one we talked about.
Yeah, it's like having, a coach in your corner.
Yeah.
Cheering you on, giving you advice.
Exactly. And speaking of support, I think it's important to point out that this whole shift towards strategic leadership, it's not just happening with individuals, it's changing entire industries.
Oh, yeah, that's right. The source material did mention that. Do any examples come to mind?
Well, one that was really interesting to me was how fire and emergency services are changing.
Oh, wow. So even firefighters are becoming more strategic.
They are. They're moving beyond just, responding to emergencies as they happen. They're being more proactive, thinking about prevention, community preparedness, reducing risks, long-term planning.
So instead of just putting out fires, they're trying to prevent them from happening in the first place.
Exactly. And it just shows how strategic leadership, it can really be applied anywhere, even in a field that's, traditionally been so reactive.
It's amazing to see this shift happening at so many levels. Individuals, organizations, even society as a whole. It really shows how powerful strategic thinking can be.
It does. It's about understanding that we can actually create the change we want to see, starting with ourselves and, the choices that we make.
So as we wrap things up here, I want to leave our listeners with one final thought. We've learned a lot today about moving from, that reactive firefighting mode to being more proactive and strategic. We've looked at some practical strategies, some really inspiring examples, and even how automation can help. But the most important thing to remember is this.
You have the power to make this shift. It's a journey, but it's definitely worth it.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into the world of strategic leadership. We hope you learned some new things and feel ready to, start your own journey toward a more proactive and fulfilling life.
And remember, it's not about being perfect. It's about making progress, one step at a time.
Until next time, stay curious and keep learning. Thanks for tuning in to the Small Business Accelerator podcast.
We really hope today's strategies help you grow your business without breaking the bank.
Don't forget to check the show notes for links to resources we've handpicked for small business success.
If you found value in today's episode, it would make our day if you subscribed to the podcast and left us a review.
You can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
And stay tuned for our next episode. Next time, we'll reveal yet another game-changing strategy that's revolutionizing how small businesses on a shoestring budget take on giant corporations and accelerate their success.
Until then, keep accelerating your success.
This is Sarah Wilson.
And Roger Bryant, signing off.